Hello and welcome to lesson 29 in this Chess Beginner to Winner series. And today we will be going over winning checkmate patterns. So it's always good to study tactics and checkmating patterns. So I have 30 of them here for you today. And I'll start off with pretty easy ones, just some basic ones that you can try and use in your own games or try and set up. You can set these up on the board and practice them, different variations on these. All right, so number one here, what would you do with white to move? Take a look at it, and hopefully you found it pretty quickly. But these are basic checkmating patterns that can help improve your game. So the more of these you learn, the better your tactics will become, especially when you're trying to hunt the enemy king. All right, so I'll turn on the evaluation here, and of course it's a mate in one. So hopefully you found this. Just bishop to d5. So this was a discovered double check here. So once this bishop moves out of the way, giving check, the rook checks at the same time. So this is a very powerful tool that you can use to attack your opponent. The double check and the discovered check, and here they work together, a double discovered check, where they both attack. And when two pieces are checking the king at the same time, the only thing he can do is try and run away. Because you can't block both of these pieces. So what does the king have here? He's trapped. He can't run anywhere. All right, let's move on to another example here. Let's see. Let me turn off this evaluation and analysis and on to problem number 2. Okay, so white to move here. So what do you think white should do? So take a look at this, and hopefully you found the answer. Pause at any time if you need more time to think. So a mate in one here. And once again, we have this theme of the double discovered check. So after rook to f8, not only does the rook give check, but now the bishop is checking. And we notice if we go back one, the bishop is about to be captured here. And then, the king could be mated on the back rank here, white's king. So white needs to act immediately. And by using the double check and this discovered check, because both pieces are attacking, the rook cannot pick off this bishop. So here we go, another example of mate. And in this position, you notice both of the attacking pieces are under threat, but because two different pieces are attacking the king is just trapped here. All right, on to number 3. Okay. All right. So hopefully if you followed this discovered checking theme, you'll find this quickly. So let's look here, another mate in one. And knight to f6 is the move here. Because not only is the bishop now checking, but the knight as well. And once again, both pieces are under attack, but because two pieces are attacking at the same time, the king is checkmated here. The king can't run to f7, of course, because of the bishop, and the knight cuts off his escape here. All right, let's look at the next one here. Problem number 4. Okay. Well, now that you've become familiar with this discovered attack theme, take a look at this one and you should be able to figure this out as well. All right. A mate in one. And remember, if you ever need any time to think, just pause the video. All right. So here we have two different opportunities to deliver this discovered double checkmate here. So the knight can move up to d8 or to g5. So either way delivers a discovered checkmate here. And once again, both pieces are attacking. Both pieces are under attack. And this time the bishop is helping guard this rook up here on g8 and protecting that. And the rook is helping to deliver mate by covering vital squares here. All right, let's move on to problem number 5. Okay, number 5. Okay, so what would you do here with white? Take a look, and hopefully you'll find this fairly quickly here. And once again, pause if you have to. All right, so another mate in 1, and what do we have here? Knight to c7. Now you have to watch out that you don't move the knight here to f6, of course, because the queen could just pick it off, giving up the queen for the knight, but then black's rook and king would be able to hunt down the king. So knight to c7 is the winning move because nothing can capture this knight, and the king is helping cut off his opponent's king, delivering mate here. So knight checkmates can be a little bit tricky, so it's probably important to go over those and practice different patterns with the knights. All right, so let's take a look at problem number 6 here. All right, number 6. Take a look and see what you think. Now, normally, 2 knights cannot checkmate a lone king, but here there was a pawn on the board, which makes a big difference. Because that pawn is on the board, it's harder for black to try and stalemate. So in this position, how does white deliver mate? It is a mate in 1, and for the mate in 1, just knight to g6 here. And we see that one knight is cutting off this h7 square, and the other knight delivers mate. All right, let's move on to problem number 7. Okay, in number 7 here, once again we have a knight on the board, but this time we have a rook and a pawn assisting the knight here in delivering checkmate. So hopefully you found this problem. Of course, another mate in 1, and knight to g6. So fairly simple. The pawn is cutting off the black king's escape, and the knight jumps in here to deliver checkmate. All right, on to number 8. And hopefully, for you more experienced players, these are probably fairly simple problems, but it can be good to review the basics, just to brush up on the basics and get a refresher, I guess, to help you remember these different possibilities in your games. All right, so what do you do here? White to move. Black has all this extra material, so white needs to act immediately here. And if you are watching with all the different knight tactics, then hopefully you'll remember, instead of promoting to a queen here, hopefully you'll find f8 promoting to a knight, delivering check, and cutting off this escape square on g6. So the knight delivers a checkmate here. And this under promotion to a knight doesn't happen very often, but it's worth taking a look at this just to remember that, because you never know when under promotion ends up being better than actually promoting to a queen when you're promoting your pawn. All right, on to number 9. the next problem here, number 9. Okay, so here we have white to move. So what does white do? And this king looks like it's trapped pretty good here. We have the king stalemated, can't go anywhere. So how does white deliver the mate here? So mate in 1, and hopefully you found D3. So the reason I showed you this problem is just to stress the importance of your pawns. Sometimes the pawn moves are overlooked when it comes to checkmate, especially if there's more pieces on the board. Sometimes we overlook important pawn moves that could lead to mate, but this is a fairly simple example. So let's move on here to problem number 10. All right. Okay. So here we go. Once again, white to move. What does white do in this position? As he is, very much behind in material, and it's just not looking too good for white material-wise, but he does have these very powerful pawns here on the 6th rank. So take a look at that, and what would you do here? All right, so it's a mate in 2 this time. So hopefully you found this. Remember, those pawn moves can make a big difference. And here there's not many options. So G7, delivering check. And because the king is cutting off the escape and the bishop is blocking black's escape, the only option is for the queen to capture here. But then the other pawn captures, delivering a mate. So a little interesting ending there where the pawn delivers mate like that. Okay, on to problem number 11. Let's see what we have next. Okay, so this one is a little more tricky. Take a look at this and see what you would do here. All right, so white to move. How does white take advantage of black's cramped position here, and how does white use his 2 pawns? All right, the evaluation here is not a quick checkmate. Now there is a possibility of a quick checkmate, but how does white hold the advantage if his opponent does not walk into a checkmate? So this one's a little more tricky. All right, let's take a look here. It looks like H6 is the best move. Now, if we play H6 here and the pawn were to capture, that would be a blunder because it would allow G7 mate here. So instead of falling for that, if we go back to the beginning, after H6, you do not want to capture this, and you definitely don't want to move your bishop and retreat either. That would be a mate with this H-pawn capturing on G7 and delivering mate. So the best move is for the bishop to capture this pawn, but then that allows you to capture. The king is forced to move to H7, and then you can go ahead and promote to a queen here. And now you're winning. It'll just take a little while to win. The king is forced to go here. What does the computer recommend? Looks like king down here to E7. Trying to move here to F6 and threaten some checkmate opportunities once this bishop moves. So hopefully you found that. Now that wasn't a mate, but if we go back to the beginning here, it does show, let's see here, let me go back. All right, so interesting position here. It shows how powerful pawns can be in certain situations. Okay, let's move on to number 12. That way I can get through all these problems. Number 12. All right. So what would we do here? White to move once again. In this position, it looks like White's queen had moved up to b7, and this pawn was here on c7. So the pawn moves forward, protected by the bishop, and now the rooks are attacking the queen and protecting this pawn. So what does White do here? Take a look at it and pause the video at any time if you need more time to think. But hopefully you found the mate in one here. All right, so once again, remember not to overlook pawn moves because sometimes they can make all the difference. So in this position, b4 mates immediately here because the queen, even though she's under attack, she protects this pawn and she cuts off these escape squares of the king, and the pawn can deliver mate here. So, a lot of times people overlook these kind of pawn moves that can deliver a mate in the end game. All right, on to problem number 13. Oh, before I do that, let me cover the lines. All right, 13. Okay, so some more basics here. White to move, and how do you deliver mate? So, hopefully you'll find this pretty quickly. And, this is an important pattern that you should recognize. So a mate in one, and hopefully you found this easy rook to b8 here. So this can be done on either side of the board, but anytime the knight is at c6 or f6, and the king is in the corner and you have a rook backing your knight up, there's a possibility of being able to deliver a mate like this. And sometimes the rook is on the other file here, on the seventh rank, and can move over this way and deliver a mate. So something to remember, because these mates, this pattern with the knight and the rook, that can come up fairly often. All right, so let's see here. On to problem number 14. Okay, once again, we have a knight and a rook working together. This time the rook is on the 7th rank. Black is ahead in material here, but how does white win the game? So take a look. Remember, pause at any time if you need more time to think. Okay, so we have a mate in 2, and how do you deliver this mate? All right, so knight to h6, delivering check, and the only option for the king is to run to f8, but now we have rook to f7, delivering mate, and the king's escape is cut off with the combination of the knight and the rook, and his own rook is blocking any escape here to e8. So another interesting pattern with knight and rook working together. Okay, on to problem number 15, and then we'll be halfway through these problems. Okay, so once again, knight and rook working together, and the king has just moved up here to attack the rook, making a mistake of, heading into the corner and trapping himself, because now with white to move, there's a mate in 1 here. So hopefully you found knight to f6. So once again, this pattern of the knight here on f6 or c6, and then the rook teams up with the knight to help cut off the king. So this time the knight is delivering the checkmate, and the rook is just preventing the king from escaping, along with this pawn as well. All right, we're halfway done. On to problem number 16. Okay, so another problem here with knight and rook working together. because there are quite a few endgames with a rook and a knight, so these are worth going over, setting up different checkmate problems like this on the board and just becoming more familiar with them. All right, so a mate in one here, and hopefully you found this. Just rook to c8. So the knight backs the rook up and delivers the mate, and this time the king is helping prevent the opponent's king from escaping. All right, on to problem number 17. Okay, so another one with knight and rook working together. So what do we do here? The rook is cutting off the opponent's king, and the knight is ready to swoop in. And if you've been following the previous examples, you should get this one. This time it's a mate in 2. And we have knight f6 delivering a check. And the only place the king can go now is into the corner. And that allows the rook to deliver the mate here. So once again, knight and rook working together. All right, problem number 18. Okay, this is probably the last one with the knight and the rook working together here. So white to move, the knight is under attack. What does white do here? All right, well, hopefully you found the simple rook up to h8 here. Because the knight, even though the knight's under attack, it doesn't want to move because it's cutting off b7 and d7, allowing the rook to deliver a back rank mate up here, and the knight prevents any escape. All right, on to problem number 19. Okay, well, I guess we have another one with knight and rook here. So what do you do in this position? White to move. And it looks like black is trying to set up a little attack and pick off this pawn. But because it's white's turn to move, he has a mate in 2. So hopefully you found this. All right, so begin with rook to e8. And now there are 2 different options. If the king runs to h7, then you can checkmate on rook to h8. But if the king runs towards the center, thinking he has some escape, well, he's in for a surprise because rook to f8 mates here, along with the help of the knight and this important pawn, which cuts off the king's escape. So a lot of times this mate can be overlooked because that pawn or some other piece that is cutting off the king's escape down here. All right, on to problem 20. Okay, so white to move here, what do you do? So black is threatening a mate here on h2. Queen captures the pawn on h2, delivering mate because this rook is cutting off the king's escape. So white needs to act immediately here. All right. So we have a mate in 1, so hopefully you found this. Okay. So one of the key features of this position is this bishop pinning the rook to the king. So this rook is kind of useless as far as defense goes, other than blocking the attack of this bishop. So this allows queen to g7 here. The knight protects the queen. Queen delivers mate because this rook cannot capture the queen because the pinning bishop here. All right, on to problem number 21. We just have 10 more problems, so I'll try and get through those quickly here. 21. All right. So white to move, what do you do here? What do you do? All right, well, hopefully you noticed in this position that the rook is lined up on the king. So that should give you a hint. It is a mate in one, but how do you deliver the mate? You have to be careful. And bishop to d4 delivers the mate. Because the rook is checking, and before, when the bishop was up here, you have to be careful that you don't do something like this, or the queen can just capture the rook here. So you must move the bishop to d4 to block the path of the queen. You're delivering check, and the bishop is cutting off h8, where the king would like to escape to. All right, on to problem number 22. Okay, once again, we have bishop and rook working together. It looks like black is trying to checkmate white here with rook to g1. So once again, white needs to act immediately here. What does he do? All right, well, hopefully you found the mate in 2 here. So let's take a look. Rook to h4, checking. Now the only way the king can escape is to go here to g8, and then you can deliver a mate here on h8. And this works in this position because this pawn is cutting off the f7 escape square. But bishop and rook working together like this is an important theme, because that can come up in your games as well, where you have a bishop on the long diagonal and the rook is ready to move in, backed up by the bishop, and here the rook delivers mate. All right, on to problem number 23. Okay, so white to move here. What does white do? And hopefully you've noticed that we have a rook lined up on the king, a bishop lined up here. So what should you do? All right, a mate in 3. So hopefully you found the answer here. Let's take a look. All right, so this is probably pretty obvious. You just capture here, forcing the king into the corner. But now what do? This part is a little tricky. So you can deliver a double discovered check here. So the rook moves up, checking, but the bishop is checking as well. So now the rook cannot capture because the king is under check by the bishop. So the king is forced to capture, allowing the other rook to move in here and deliver a mate because the bishop is cutting off the escape here. So that was a little trickier. Hopefully you found that. All right, on to problem number 24. Okay, so what do we have here? Problem number 24. Now, this is an interesting problem here, something that you could try in one of your games. I think I've had something similar like this come up in some of my games before. So white to move, what do you do here? All right. You may think, oh, do I just capture the knight here? Well, no, of course not, because the rook can just pick you off here. All right, so hopefully you found this. A mate in 2. So capture the rook here, and then of course the king is forced to capture, and then you can deliver a back rank mate like this. So interesting little tactical checkmate there. All right, let's finish out these last 6 problems. So we're on to number 25. Okay, white to move, what do you do here? Now, black is about to checkmate white with queen to f1. So white must act immediately here. So take a look. All right. Hopefully you found this a mate in 3, or at least the first move, of course, and hopefully you got all of it. But if not, just practice checkmate attacks and problems like this, and it should help you improve. All right, so, of course we want to check immediately here because we're under attack. Now the king will run to the only square possible here, and you might think, well, I could just go after the queen, trade off queens and go into a drawn endgame. But why do that when you have a mate opportunity? With queen to f5 check, the king can't run, the queen cannot be captured, so the only option is to block with the pawn. But now the queen is able to capture here and deliver mate with the help of the rook. So interesting little attack there. All right. And, I should go back and look at that because this is probably more common in endgames than you would think, because there's probably a lot of endgames where you're down to just 3 pawns on each side and it looks like a draw. So this is worth taking another quick look at. Check, the king runs there, the queen checks, block, and then mate. So this is probably a pretty valuable checkmate pattern to know. All right, on to number 26. Okay, white to move. What do you do here? All right, take a look at it. Pause the video if you need more time. If not, let's figure this out. Okay, here we see that there's a battery of bishop and then queen here. So that's a hint on what you should do here. Also, the king is a little bit limited on where he can go because of this pawn that's cutting off some escape squares. So hopefully you found the answer here, which is a mate in 2. So it's a little surprising because we're moving queen to g5 with check, giving up your queen by this rook here, because once you're in check, the king can't go anywhere. The queen is cutting off these dark squares. The pawn cuts off the light squares. The king is under attack. There's no way to block, so the rook is forced to capture here. But now the bishop recaptures with mate. So sometimes queen sacrifices, well, most of the time queen sacrifices are overlooked because, who wants to give up their queen? But if there's a checkmate possible, then it's a good reason to do that. All right, the last 3 problems here. 27. We're on problem 27 now. Okay, white to move. What do you do? All right, let's take a look here. Hopefully you found this. A mate in 3. Now, this is a good one to know because sometimes this occurs over on the king side when you're attacking. But take a look at this. We've captured a pawn here with the bishop, and now there's a discovered check opportunity here. So where do we go? Well, the fastest way is a mate in 3 with bishop to b6 check, forcing the king to move, and then queen to a7, checking again. The king tries to run, but there's a mate here. So interesting little checkmate pattern there. Take a look at it once again. Discovered check, king runs, we check with the queen, he runs again, and then mate. All right, the last two problems here. On to number 28, or should I say three problems? I guess my math needs some work. All right, problem 28. Okay, what do we do here? It's white's turn to move. We have this battery of bishop and queen. So remember, that's an important theme when you have a battery of queen and rook or queen and bishop working together. They're a little stronger. So white to move here. So hopefully you found the mate in 2. So let's take a look. All right, bishop to d7. Now, the king, of course, cannot capture the bishop because it's protected, but the queen cannot capture the bishop either because the queen is pinned by the queen here, by white's queen. So the king is forced to run, and then we just capture and deliver a mate. So interesting little pattern there. All right, on to 29. So the last two problems here. 29. Okay, white to move. What do you do? Take a look. And remember, pause if you need more time. If not, let's find the answer here. A mate in 2. So, once again, we have a queen sacrifice. So the queen moves up here, checking the king. The king is trapped. The king cannot capture because this pawn is protecting the queen. So we have capture by the rook. But now we have mate delivered by this pawn, which promotes by capturing. And then we can promote to a queen or a rook here and deliver mate. All right, the final problem, number 30 here. So let's pull up number 30. And white to move once again. Black is threatening an immediate checkmate with queen to f2 using this bishop and queen battery. So white needs to act immediately here. So what do you do with white? You think, the average person would probably just capture the queen here, trade off the queen, and go into try to draw the end game. But there is a win here. So, a mate in 2. Now, hopefully you found this. So, knight to h5. And the king is very limited on what it can do, black's king. So the only move possible, because the queen is cutting off the e file, f7, g6, the only thing the king can do is move to f5. And now you may have overlooked this pawn move. So now we have g4, the pawn delivers mate. And I just want to remind you that it's important to take a look at pawn moves because sometimes they are overlooked and you may overlook a mating opportunity. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed these checkmating patterns, and hopefully you can use them in your own games in the future. And remember to brush up on tactics and patterns, and it'll greatly improve your chess. Well, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to leave comments, suggestions, or any requests on chess material you would like to see in the future. All right, thank you for watching and have a super chess day.